Episode 1 of Life on Earth is called The Infinite Variety. So Life on Earth is the landmark natural history series that came out in 1979. The idea for the series came about when Attenborough was still working in the upper echelons of the BBC, when there was a series called Civilization that charted basically human civilization throughout the years in a kind of similar like multi-episode arc. And he thought this format would translate very well to the story of evolution. He took that to the BBC and they basically let him make this series. This series was extremely expensive. They travelled all over the world, something that hadn't been done on this scale before. This series basically changed the way the natural history films were made. Every series since then basically goes all over the world, filming animals in their natural habitats, doing various things. This is the series that pioneered that. Before this, you basically just had people going out to a specific location and filming 5 or 10 episodes in the one location, looking at animals, usually with a presenter catching things. But this was just that on an epic scale. And to be honest with you, this format really worked for the story of evolution, and it hasn't really been tackled since. I can't think of a single series that's tackled the story of evolution in the way that this series did. First episode is basically just an intro, and it deals with the theories of evolution and natural selection. This probably could be, in theory, the most boring episode of the series, but it really isn't. I think it's really, really good. The very opening montage where we basically see loads of different animals. I mean, that's pretty commonplace today. But in 1979, nothing like that had ever been seen before. People were like, what the hell? We're going to see whales, monkeys, wasps, all in the same series? Like, that just hadn't been done before. Attenborough just bouncing around the world, pretty much, again, things that are pretty commonplace now, were just so unexpected at the time. It just completely changed the game. Like, he would sometimes change continents mid-sentence. Like, that's just not something you had before. And Attenborough is great. I mean, he's a great presenter. He'd already proved his presenting chops by this point on things like Zoo Quest and stuff like that. But this was a different scale because he wrote, produced, it pretty much was, pretty big behind the scenes. Obviously, he had a pretty extensive team with him and a massive budget, obviously. And again, this episode's great. I mean, we basically open up in the Amazon talking about the sheer diversity of life on Earth. And that's a pretty good place to explain that because it's the most diverse place on Earth. And again, throughout this series, they pick the best examples to highlight the information they're talking about. And I think that's something this episode does great, and that's just continued throughout the rest of the series. And from there we move on to the Galapagos, because we're talking about the natural selection and Darwin's theory of evolution. They do a good job of showing you the examples that made him come to the conclusion of natural selection. The things like the cormorants with the stubby wings, the marine iguanas, the giant tortoises. There's a lot of stuff with the giant tortoises here, with their different shells, and how that enabled them to feed in different ways. And it is pretty grim the way they describe it, how, all these like baby tortoises are less adapted to feeding on certain islands, will probably die out, and that's just how natural selection works. It does a good job of highlighting how cruel a mechanism that is. It's just very, matter-of-factly, and I think that's what's good about Attenborough's delivery. It is very matter-of-fact. Tortoises were actually quite cumbersome to film, because they kept getting woken up in the night when they were camping on the islands by the tortoises mating because they were so loud. And from there we explore fossils. So fossils are obviously pretty key for understanding prehistoric life and the theories of evolution, and they do a great job of showing you the Grand Canyon. And this could all seem a bit like a university lecture, like it could in theory be a bit boring, but there's nothing boring about watching Attenborough descend into the Grand Canyon on the back of a donkey. Like, it's just great. It's very Indiana Jones. And it's quite funny because Attenborough actually was allergic to the donkeys that he was riding. You can actually see in a lot of the shots in the Grand Canyon, his eyes are quite puffy and he's kind of doing this a lot. Like, it is actually quite fun to notice that now realising that was the case. The Grand Canyon's a great place to explore fossils because not only is it a really cool place to look at, and the cinematography, even though it's 1979, it's still pretty good by today's standards. Like, I was expecting it to look a lot more dated than it actually does. As you go deeper into the Grand Canyon, the fossils that you find are a lot more primitive. There's a lot of reptiles in the upper layers, but as you go further down, you see less reptiles, you see more invertebrates. Eventually you just get algae. It's really cool showing you just the number of things that are fossilized. And from there we explore a lot of cellular life, unicellular organisms. Still really interesting. Things like amoebas are quite cool. Those blue-greens, those structures formed by single-celled organisms that are quite big off the coast of Australia, they're quite impressive. And again, they just look like rocks, but they are quite cool to look at. They do a good job of going to really inhospitable places like Yellowstone, into the volcanoes. They do a good job of picking places that make you feel like you're in that time in Earth's history. I think that's quite good. And we explore the first animals. The three main groups of animals we explore in this episode are sponges, jellies, and coral. Sponges don't get as much time because they're the least complex, but it's good that they highlight them because they're the most primitive animals on Earth. And then we move on to jellies. So the jellyfish are really interesting. This is the most extensive look at jellyfish I've ever seen. We go from the simple comb jellies to the medusas to the true jellyfish, and they're all really interesting. It does a good job of showing you the diversity, because comb jellies are pretty simple organisms, and as you get further along to things like Portuguese man of wars, things that are pretty complex, and the life cycle of jellyfish are quite interesting because their first life cycle when they're like polyps, they kind of function a bit like plants. Because jellyfish are so closely related to corals, but corals are essentially, just a habitat to us. We don't tend to think of them as animals. It is interesting to show how closely they are, at least at that stage of their lives. And the jellyfish were cool, watching them, feeding. It was really interesting, the different mechanisms. Some of them got longer tentacles for stinging. Some of these have got these more fleshy appendages to kind of fan in microscopic organisms. It's really cool. I thought it was just really interesting because I think we do take jellyfish for granted a lot. And then we end on corals. So corals, again, are pretty interesting. Again, we do look at the differences in corals. There's soft corals and hard corals. We tend to then just think of hard corals, I think, because they're the ones that form the reefs. But it was interesting highlighting, the soft corals as well. And the last shot of the episode is Attenborough just, snorkeling around the Great Barrier Reef, and he comes up for air and he's like, life has truly begun. And I'd say that is the one thing, it is a bit of an abrupt ending. I think later endings in the series have, more of a cliffhanger vibe to them. It does feel like they're telling a story. But, it is still pretty good. So this episode it's actually really good. It's a really good episode. It could have been pretty boring, to be honest with you. And especially considering it came out in 1979, it is more educational than things that are post-Planet Earth, I would say, which are more spectacle driven. But I thought this was really cool and really interesting. I really liked the stuff with the jellyfish, that was great. But all the other stuff with the fossils was cool. Just seeing Attenborough travelling around the world. Some of them we've seen many, many times since. But something about it being the first time was really cool. So I really liked that. So yeah, let me know in the comments below what you thought of this episode. What did you think? Did you like it? And have you actually seen Life on Earth before? I feel like this is one a lot of people haven't seen because it's so old. But it is very important and it's actually really good. I really like this series. So yeah, I'll be doing the next one next week. So look forward to that. And as ever, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Or don't if you don't want to. It's perfectly fine. And I'll see you next time, and goodbye.